Hello pilgrims! In this video, we are going to see how the Camino de Santiago is going in 2025, so we will analyze how it went last year. And then we are going to see the fuss that has been made about the change in the rules for getting the Compostela, the document that accredits that you have done the Camino de Santiago on foot, because it's a real mess. Let's go! Almost 500,000 pilgrims arrived in Santiago last year. It's surprising because a few years ago nobody went. 30 years ago there were over 100,000 pilgrims, 15 years ago 200,000, and in 2024 there were almost 500,000. So what will happen this year? Well, obviously we will exceed 500,000 pilgrims, but it is not going to grow as much as in recent years. And I'll tell you why. This year there is competition. This year we have the Holy Year in Rome, which is every 25 years. And there are people who would come, especially in summer, to do the Camino de Santiago and have decided to change it this year for Rome. Therefore this year, although the number of pilgrims will grow, it will not be as great as in other years. And when is our Holy Year? Well, it's not long now, it's in 2027. We have 2 years left until the start of the Jacobean Holy Year. And what were those pilgrims like last year? Well, let's take a look at just a few things. To do that, we'll analyze the statistics from the Santiago Pilgrim Office, which are very complete, and also those from the Buen Camino application, which for some time now has become the guide, the application that almost all pilgrims carry, and its statistics are very complete. Firstly, they are pilgrims from all over the world. Until recently they were Spanish, or at most French, German, but now they come from all countries. Look, in 2024 there were almost 40,000 pilgrims from the United States. It has become the second country in terms of the number of pilgrims. 8,000 Korean pilgrims, 7,000 from Australia. They come from all countries. And this will continue in 2025. The proportion of Spanish pilgrims will decrease, as will that of European pilgrims, and it will grow, above all, from countries such as the United States, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand. These are countries with great growth. And also, this is going to be very important, from China and Taiwan. You could see it coming. They were growing a little bit out of nowhere, because hardly any pilgrims came from that area. In 2023, 3,500 arrived. Last year there were 6,200, and this year it will be a higher figure, and it continues to grow. And realize that even if only a small proportion come from China and Taiwan, there are so many of them that they will fill the Camino. Pay attention to that. Secondly, they come of all ages. It is a universal route. Before it was people between 30 and 60. Last year, 50,000 over 65 came, and as many under 18, and this is going to continue. Proportionally, there are more and more pilgrims over 65 or under 18. Thirdly, they arrive by all routes. As you know, there are many routes that are called the Camino de Santiago. If not, I'll explain it to you. There is the French way, which has always been the most used route, but then there are the Northern way, the primitive way, the Portuguese ways. There are many, many routes, and the greatest growth is precisely in the Portuguese ways, in the central one, and especially the one along the coast. And it will continue. You can see from the inquiries we receive that in the year 25 there will continue to be a stagnation of the French way, which, being the most important, already has a stable number of pilgrims. It is a mature route. A notable growth of the central Portuguese way and the English way, and especially the Portuguese way along the coast. This has a growth rate that should be taken into account, because we believe that it is growing at a faster rate than the number of places available to sleep. Therefore, in the busiest month, it will be necessary to be careful to find accommodation. As for the routes that do not reach Santiago, those that join other routes to Santiago, the Camino de Santiago de Madrid and the Camino del Salvador, which is a route that joins León and Oviedo through the mountains, are growing the most. And from outside Spain, we mainly have the Via Le Puy-en-Velay and the Via Arles, which are growing a lot. In fact, all the routes in France are growing a lot, and to a lesser extent also in Germany. And do you know why? This is because these roads are getting better and better, and you can see that fewer French people are arriving in Santiago, and also fewer or the same number of German pilgrims, because they decide to do the routes in their own countries. They are increasingly well signposted, they have better accommodation, and they decide to do the routes in France and also the Germans in Germany. And fourthly, when do they arrive? Well, all year round. I'm seeing pilgrims passing through in December, whereas before it was mainly in the summer, especially in July and August. Now it has spread throughout the year. In fact, last year, for the first time, the month with the most pilgrims on the route was May. We could see the growth coming in spring, but last year for the first time May was in first place. September and April also grew a lot. In fact, this year we have to pay attention to April because it coincides with Holy Week. And if we add to that the growth in the number of pilgrims in this month, then April, May and September are going to be very important months, followed by August, July and June. And some more data. How are the pilgrims getting along the way? Well, mostly on foot. And this is interesting because until recently, up to a third of the pilgrims chose to go by bicycle, for example. But that has been reducing. In the past year, there were 20,000 cyclists, which compared to the total 500,000 is quite a minority. And also, as a curious fact, the subject of female pilgrims, until recently it was a route of mainly male pilgrims, and after the pandemic it evened out. And now there are even a little more female pilgrims than male pilgrims. And there is the important subject of how much the pilgrims travel. Until now, the rule for getting the Compostela said that you had to cover the last 100 kilometers on foot to reach Santiago on foot. This meant that a large number of pilgrims only did the last 100 kilometers. In fact, last year half of the pilgrims, 250,000, only traveled the last 100 kilometers. Which for me seems a bit short, because to experience the Camino intensely, to experience its freedom, its universality, the problems that arise which are easily surmountable, the generosity that there is along the route, you need a slightly longer pilgrimage. In other words, if you can do an extra day, 2, an extra week, or start in Roncesvalles, you're going to have a much better experience of the Camino de Santiago. Well, but the rule has changed, and now you have to travel 100 kilometers from anywhere, from any Camino de Santiago. In other words, you can go from Madrid to Cercedilla, and you've already done the Camino de Santiago. And they add one more thing, that you have to reach Santiago doing the last stage on foot. They don't specify which is the last stage, if it's 30, if it's 20, if it's 5 kilometers. But it's also more hassle. Because if you choose 100 kilometers in a foreign section, for example in Portugal, from Porto, or on the route of the Le Puy-en-Velay in France, then you have to do another 70 kilometers on foot in Spain, and of course that last stage, which we don't know what it is, to reach Santiago on foot. What a mess. And why is this? In the end, it makes a certain amount of sense because they have been left with a kind of I try but I can't situation of admitting everyone as a pilgrim. Not only are those who walk 100 or more kilometers pilgrims, but everyone is a pilgrim. And it is a dichotomy that appeared in the 20th century, because until then, people made pilgrimages to Santiago and walked the Camino de Santiago. And it was the same thing. However, when the bus, the train, the plane came along, well, you could make a pilgrimage to Santiago without walking the Camino de Santiago. You could make a pilgrimage to Santiago, be a pilgrim, arrive by plane and go to the tomb of the Apostle Santiago, but not have walked a single kilometer. So there is this dilemma of 2 points of view. You are a pilgrim if you have arrived in Santiago, or if you have traveled the route. And there is only one document, the Compostela. My idea, which I have already proposed in a video on this channel, is that there should be 2 documents, the Compostela, which certifies that you have arrived as a pilgrim in Santiago, whether you have walked a kilometer, 100, 1,000, none, whatever. You are a pilgrim who has arrived in Santiago, and you want a document to prove it. And another, call it what you will, the Compostela Premium, the Compostela Plus, whatever, that proves that, in addition to having made the pilgrimage to Santiago, you have walked the Camino de Santiago, that it is an added bonus, that it is good to do the Camino de Santiago. This has been encouraged above all since the 60s, with the desire to recover the Camino on foot, and it is something that helps in the pilgrimage. But yes, a long-term journey, not the last stage of 5 kilometers, nor 100 kilometers, but one in which you can intensely experience the virtues of the Camino de Santiago. For that you need at least 10 or 15 days, that is, a minimum of 300 kilometers. What will happen this year? Will the rules for getting the Compostela be changed again? Will the number of pilgrims in the last 100 kilometers be cleared up, and will it increase in the 100 kilometers of other sections? Well, I'll let you know. Let's see what happens. In the meantime, you can comment on this video, see what you think of this change of rules, or how you see the Camino in 2025. Buen Camino.